Hey people, it's Nance talking. It's another Black Heroes video. Now I decided to call him a Black Hero because he had other contributions in life as opposed to simply being an inventor. So this is Thomas Jennings, and this source is smithsonianmag.com, the first African American to hold a patent in invented dry scouring. In 1821, Thomas Jennings patented a method for removing dirt and grease from clothing that would lead to days dry cleaning. Next time you pick up your clothes at the dry cleaner, send a thank you to the memory of Thomas Jennings. Jennings invented a process called dry scouring, a forerunner of modern dry cleaning. He patented the process in 1821, making him likely the first black person in America to receive a patent. Jennings was able to do this because he was born free in New York City. But for the great majority of black people in America before the Civil War, patents were unobtainable as an enslaved person's inventions legally belonged to his or her master. And I want to talk about this again, that people talk about reparations. Lots of things that were invented, like Jack Daniel's whiskey, were made by black people, but they were prevented from ever profiting from it because they technically could not apply for a patent and it belonged to a white person. So that's another thing people don't want to talk about. The billions and billions of dollars that are owed to black people via patents that they couldn't have access to. According to The Inventive Spirit of African Americans by Patricia Carter Sluby, Jennings, and that might be a book people want to get, Jennings started out as an apprentice to a prominent New York tailor. Later, he opened what would become a large and successful clothing shop in Lower Manhattan. He secured a patent for his dry scouring method of removing dirt and grease from clothing in 1821 when he was 29 years old. An item in the New York Gazette from March 13th of that year announced Jennings' success in patenting a method of dry scouring clothes and woolen fabrics in general so they would keep their original shape and help their polish and appearance of new. But we'll never know exactly what the scouring method involved. The patent is one of the so-called X patents, a group of 10,000 or so patents issued by the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office between its creation in 1719 and 1856, when a fire began in Washington's Blodgett Hotel, where the patents were being temporarily stored while a new facility was being built. There was a fire station next door to the facility, but it was winter and the firefighters' lever hoses had cracked in the cold. Before the fire, patents weren't numbered, just catalogued by their name and issue date. After the fire, the Patent Office, as it was called then, began numbering patents. Any copies of the banned patents that were obtained from the inventors were given a number as well, ending in X, to mark them as part of the destroyed batch. As of 2004, about 2,800 of the X patents have been recovered. Jennings is not one of them. I wonder if that was because he was black. Something that was very profitable for a black man. When it's destroyed, let's just pretend we can't find that patent again. Sluby writes that Jennings was so proud of his patent letter, which was signed by Secretary of State and later President John Quincy Adams, he hung it in a gilded frame over his bed. Much of his apparently substantial earnings from the invention went towards the fight for abolition. He would go on to found or support a number of charities and legal aid societies, as well as Freedom's Journal, the first black-owned newspaper in America, and the influential Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. All of Jennings' children were educated, became successful in their careers, and prominent in the abolition movement. His daughter Elizabeth, a school teacher, rose to national attention in 1854 when she boarded a whites-only horse-drawn streetcar in New York and refused to get off, hanging onto a window frame when the conductor tried to toss her out. A letter she wrote about the incident was published in several abolitionist papers, and her father hired a lawyer to fight the streetcar company. The case was successful. The judge ruled it was unlawful to reject black people from public transportation so long as they were sober, well-behaved, and free from disease. The lawyer was a young Chester A. Arthur who would go on to become president in 1881. Though free black Americans like Jennings were free to patent their inventions, in practice, obtaining a patent was difficult and expensive. And I just want to point this out. People talk a lot about how there aren't any legal barriers to black people doing stuff. This is an early example. Theoretically, black people could do things, but there were all manner of ways that barriers that were put up to stop them doing it. So A is difficult and expensive. So the same way that black neighborhoods have become historically poorer through redlining, and because of the way funding for schools is obtained via property taxes and the fact that homes in black neighborhoods are very low compared to white neighborhoods, it means that black schools are run down and that a black school will miseducate your children and not as well as a white school. And anyway, some black inventors hid their race to avoid discrimination, even though the language of patent law was officially colorblind. Others used white partners as proxies, writes Brian L. Fry, a professor at the University of Kentucky College of Law, is in his article Invention of a Slave. This makes it difficult to know how many African Americans were actually involved in early patents. If a white person infringed on a black inventor's patent, it would have been difficult to fight back, says Petra Moser, a professor of economics at New York University Stern School of Business. If the legal system was biased against black inventors, they wouldn't have been able to defend their patents, she says. The right infringer would have been believed. Also, you need capital to defend your patent, and black inventors generally had less access to capital. Same process today. A black person has access to the same law and court, and yet there's a whole bunch of barriers that are not, strictly speaking, quote-unquote, racial, that stop them fulfilling it. It's likely that some slave owners secretly patented their slaves' inventions for high rights. At least 2 slave owners applied for patents of their slave inventions but were denied because no one could take the patent oath. The enslaved inventor was not eligible to hold a patent, and the owner was not the inventor. Despite these barriers, African Americans, both enslaved and free, invented an enormous number of technologies, from steamboat propellers to bedsteads to cotton scrapers. Some made money without patents, others had their earnings exploited. To this day, and you see some of these things, steamboat propellers. And considering how important steamboats were to the trade, how many millions and millions of dollars were created in profit that they never achieved. To this day, there's so-called patent gap between whites and minorities. Half as many African Americans and Hispanic college graduates hold patents compared to whites with the same level of education. There are likely a number of reasons for this, from unequal education to income equality to lesser access to capital, but what's clear is the gap is a loss for all of society. Invention requires a rare set of talents. Let's call them creativity, intelligence, and resilience, Moses said. When you ignore the entire pool of non-white, non-male inventors, it's hugely wasteful, to say the least. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that. So Thomas Jennings was was one of the first black inventors, so he was a trailblazer in that he got one of the first patents. He also used his money to push himself and his children forward so that they could become prominent people, and was an abolitionist who helped free other black people from slavery. So this is something that is to be said. Loads of people talk about, I've had conversations when I talk about black rich people, they say that, they don't owe anybody else stuff with their money. The thing is, if a few rich, we've talked about Neely Fuller Jr. on this channel before. A few black people will be showcased by their success, and if they do not use their money to help other black people, then showing off that the fact that they have managed to attain wealth but do not use any of that to help other black people is really of no use at all. In fact, in a lot of ways, it's detrimental because it confuses black people by showing a few people who have succeeded but not using their positions in any way to help other black people reach that position. But this is getting slightly off the point. For those who are interested in what I've just spoken about, get Neely Fuller Jr.'s The United Independent Compensatory Code Concept. Neely Fuller Jr., The United Independent Compensatory Code Concept. Anyway, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.